Please tell us your name.
My name is Tsewang Tenzin.
His Holiness the Dalai Lama asked us to record your experiences so that we can share your memories with many generations of Tibetans, the Chinese, and the rest of the world. Your memories will help us to document the true history, culture, and beliefs of the Tibetan people.
Sure.
Do you give your permission for the Tibet Oral History Project to use this interview?
I do.
Thank you for offering to share your story with us. During this interview, if you wish to take a break or stop at any time, please let me know.
Thank you.
If you do not wish to answer a question or talk about something, let me know. If this interview was shown in Tibet or China, would this be a problem for you?
No problem.
We are honored to record your story and appreciate your participation in this project.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Let us begin, Tsewang La, by hearing a little bit about where you were born in Tibet.
I was born in western Tibet, and it's called Ngari, the province, Purang, the district, and the proper village is Mukrum.
And how far was it from the Nepal border?
It's very close. It may be overnight journey by foot.
Okay.
Either it's tri-junction, Tibet, Nepal, and India.
Yes.
And there's a lot of advantage and disadvantage being on the tri-border of the three countries.
Interesting. What were some of the advantages and disadvantages?
Advantages where people can go either of the country in a short time.
Yeah.
Disadvantage is that you face sometimes a hustle from the stranger from the other places.
Hostilities.
Or not hostility. You may come across people asking for shelter, and you give generous shelter to them, and then sometimes things doesn't happen the way we wanted.
Yes.
People might leave, people might steal something, or they may cause some disturbance to the families.
I see.
So that's sometime it may happen.
Yes. It was like a real crossroads.
Right.
And so many travelers would come,
Yep.
sometimes causing a little bit of difficulty.
Right.
And how many people were in your family?
We have a big family, maybe over 16 or some.
16?
Yeah, 16.
And who did that include?
Okay, it's a big joint semi-nomadic family. The elders, grandparents, and then there are monks in the monasteries, and then their uncles, they go for the animals, yaks and sheep, and then there are other uncles, and they work for the farm, from the field. So there may be at least 4 different aspects of the family. Some during wintertime, elders take for the retreat, and monks are in the monasteries, and then the kids are in the main home, and then the other uncles go for with the animal to the plain of India, Tibet.
And when you say there were 16, were they living all in the same house, or were there like many little houses?
It's a big house. They come across together in the summertime.
Really?
Wintertime, everybody have a different. For example, my grand aunt, she go retreat to the caves.
Oh, she did.
And my other uncle, he's on the retreat. And then the kids are in the main home. And then the other ones are preparing tsamba making is a whole process, they make it.
I see.
And then the dressmaking is also another issue. The days together, people make dress for the coming Lhasa, for at least 1 or 2 pieces everybody should have. So the tailors are called in, and they make dress for the coming Lhasas.
Oh, it sounds like it was a very lively homestead. Many things happening.
Yes. And then everybody has their own duties.
What are some of your favorite memories of your childhood in that large home?
Most exciting was where the eve of the new year, you have your dress that you're going to put on the losa,
Yeah.
and you keep it on in your bed. And you are so excited to put it on. And that's another excitement.
What?
And then we get a lot of stories from the elder one. Before going to bed, you have to beg for a story to be told. And then if you find some visiting uncles coming, you get an expectation, new story.
Really?
You don't want to hear the same old story from the same old person.
Can you remember any stories that you heard as a child?
The stories normally go by the witches. Witches, most common is the witch's life is put in the pile of a bag.
Witches.
Witches, yeah. And then somebody is given a project to see the witches. And then the one who's taking the project is supposed to be killed by the witches. But somehow he gets help. The witches will be there. You're going to give the message to the witches. Witches will pretend to treat you well. And then meantime, you have to find the bag where the life source of all the witches are in the leather bag. And you have to get it and throw it in the fire. And then all the witches will run, and as anything running, you have to put in the fire, and they all die. You get destroyed, all the witches. That sort of story is very exciting.
Interesting. So the task was to find the bag that contained the essence or spirit of the witches?
Yes.
And to steal the bag and throw
In the fire.
it in the fire to destroy the witches. And what was the reason why you wanted to destroy the witches?
So that there will be no harm to the villages. They will be peaceful.
And were the witches men or women?
Witches, men, women.
They were women.
Women.
What did they look like?
Normally they said they'll pretend to be very nice, gentle in presence, and outwardly, and they are very ugly, and their inner actual appearance is very what do you call this? Scary.
Scary. Their inner
Yeah, inner.
self. But outside they looked
Oh, they're nice.
and normal. So
Right.
they could be very deceptive
Right.
looking. Oh, that was quite a story. Were there any other kinds of stories that you remember as a child that were exciting to hear?
Yeah, I used to remember so many stories. Now with the advance of age,
Yeah.
I don't remember much. And then story of Milarepa is very commonly.
Could you tell us that story?
Yeah, Milarepa as a kid, hardship he faced, and the challenges he took it to fulfill the wishes of his mother. And then later on, he did horrible things, and how much hard working he was to purify his inner self, and that sort of story.
Did you like that story?
Oh yeah.
What impressed you about that story?
Normally the monks and the spiritual paths, you see purity in it, and then you wish to follow yourself. And we don't realize actual hardship they are there. The very dress of the monks, it appeals you that you want to be a monk like that.
So you're drawn
Yeah.
to want to be a monk.
Right.
And you don't realize the hardship of that life
Yes.
and the difficulty of that.
Difficult.
Did you ever want to be a monk?
When I was in high school, I had some desire, and then I did give my name to be ordained by Dalai Lama, and on the actual day names are read out, my name is missing, and then I kept quiet. Oh, it may be for good or bad, And then I did not become monk.
And you didn't. That's
Otherwise, I would have landed up in Dharamsala.
yeah.
When they first started the Tibetan Buddhist school of dialectics.
Yes.
Dialectics. Yeah, or first start of director was my teacher, and those students were my class friends.
Interesting. I wonder why your name wasn't on the list.
I don't know how. I gave it to my teacher, and on the day name was read out. These students will come have a haircut by Dalai Lama to be ordained monk. At that time, my name was missing. Then I thought, oh, then maybe good or bad.
You didn't know.
I didn't.
You didn't
so
know.
I did not pursue.
Well, we'll go back to your childhood story a little bit. In this family, wonderful family home with about 16 people and many levels of activity, what were some of your favorite memories? You said hearing stories from travelers. What other things did you do as a child when you were in this house?
Going to the monasteries.
Oh, yeah?
There's certain occasion we can go to the monastery. It's very exciting. All the villagers come to the monasteries. There will be monk dance, Lama dance, and then there will be very exciting people. A lot of people come to the monastery with the best dress, and you happen to see a lot of relatives, and they give you presents. If your parents were known to those other relatives, you get presents, and then you see the Lama dances. The most exciting are there are poles, and then in one of the dance, some 4 monks climb up the poles as fast as, and then they burst a kind of balloons. And balloons, we don't have the balloons, and this looks like they use some animal's intestine.
Skin.
Yeah, and then they burst it out with the drums and all that.
Does something come out of the
Oh, noise.
noise?
Noise. And those monks were climbing up the poles, and they are scary and they are fast.
Wow.
And then the black hat dance, so many dance. It goes, I think, 2 days.
It goes 2 days of dancing. You know, when the Chinese said they were liberating Tibet, they said they wanted to free people from the oppression of the monasteries and where people were mistreated by the monastic leaders. What was your experience of that? Did your family or yourself or anybody feel oppressed by the monasteries? Or mistreated?
Looks like to some extent the family has to attend to the monasteries, like say removing their restrooms. It's all dry. Restroom is open. In the room there's a hole, and then you do your restrooms activities. Then after that, there's no water flashing. You throw dust.
Yes.
And that piles up, fills up the whole room. And then in a year, you have to remove all those. And those tasks are given to the villagers.
To the villagers.
To remove it. And then technically the villagers, they do farming.
Yes.
Many of those land owned by the monasteries.
Right.
And then you have to serve the monasteries. In turn, you get the land to be used, and then you may have to have some in return from the harvest.
From the harvest.
So, big monasteries they're trying to be self-sufficient, but they are not self-sufficient. So, interdependence. So, ideally, the villagers depend on the monastery. Monastery also depend on the villagers. So villagers need to be treated a little more fairly in terms of providing some help. So the monastery, they tend to demand more help from the villagers than the other way around.
And did you, during your, well, it was your young childhood, only up till 10, I guess you didn't see any changes coming about. That was pretty much the same for those years of your childhood?
Towards the end, the monks tend to leave monasteries, and then you have to have the monks' permission from the Chinese to going to the monastery and coming out of the monastery.
Right.
So when we are planning to escape Tibet, my youngest uncle was in Satya monastery. So my mom is talking about how we're going to get him.
Yeah.
And she was suggesting me, you stay in the house and then he will come from the monastery and you two come along the river and then get into India. And I said, no. And somehow they were worried that he may be left behind because he's in the monastery.
And was he?
And then later on, somehow he was able to come with us.
He was able to.
So that time it showed that Chinese control.
I see. Before the Chinese began to control the monasteries, was there any benefit that you feel the people, the farmers, and the villagers got from the monasteries? Why? What was the part that helped them? Why did they even support the monasteries?
Because their sons go to monasteries, and then they may be the land. Many of the land may be owned by the monasteries. So in turn, they might have agreement, written documentation that is mutually help each other in terms of services. And then the monks, if the family monks get admission into monastery, they get some teachings from the monasteries without no actual fees and all that.
I see. So back to your family, were there any, tell me about your parents. What did your father do for a living?
Okay. My parents were not married because my mom is the only daughter of her parent who has 8 brothers. So after 5 sons, my grandfather requested to daughter be granted. I don't know who it is said to have requested, maybe to the lamas or some deities.
He prayed.
Prayed. And then my mother was born. And there's no way that he will give his only daughter in marriages. And then somehow I was conceived, and my father's family, and they had recognition of me being their son. So there is a some kind of paternity acknowledgement. In Tibet they do that, though parents are not married. The father's side offer a day's feast, and then also a day's prayers in cleansing of the new baby, and that way paternity recognition is established. My father was a son of a doctor of the Tibet Java, and my grandfather, paternal grandfather, was MG. MG means Tibetan medical doctor, and they are quite a reputed family. And then later on, they never get together as a husband and wife. And then before we departed Tibet, and he died, very young. He might have died very young.
Did you spend any time with him growing up?
One time I remember that my mother gave me some money to go to see him, give it to him as a treatment gesture for his medical treatment. And I stayed with him for some time, and then he gave me some direction. He has some other relatives where he keeps some of his personal things, and then he told, go to the aunt's some of the aunt's places, and he has some candies and stuff for me with them to collect them. Then I went there, and then they treat me very well, and I got those presents as he has directed to collect from those his relatives.
How far away did he live from you?
In the Mukrum village, we were in the central of the village,
Yes.
and their house is at the end.
At the end.
Yeah, it's very close.
And were you, so you live with your mother
Yes.
predominantly?
Yes.
And what, your father was working as a doctor?
No, his father.
His father was.
Yeah.
So what was your father doing?
He mainly worked for the family, taking care of the field, animals, and looks like he did not become doctor like his father.
I see.
So they may have some hardship.
Uh-huh.
Otherwise, normally the father tried to make his son
Exactly.
to be a doctor.
I know.
That's a very common tradition and that did not happen, and they may have some reasons.
And what about your mother, who was not allowed to marry by her father? So were you growing up in her father's home, with your mother? Was that her father's establishment or family, where you grew up?
I grew up in my maternal grandfather's
Your
home.
maternal grandfather's. Was
Yeah.
that the big house?
Big house, yeah. And then her brother next to her was married. Married, and they brought married, and then the siblings, his children, have the traditional inheritance for the ongoing month. So it's funny, if you are born to not to the center core of the family,
Yeah.
couples, and others are sidelined. You can stay in the home, but you are not important in the sense that the core family the lineage will be responsible in getting married.
Did you feel as a child, even though your birth was blessed and acknowledged, did you feel you were treated differently than the other children?
No. My youngest uncle was the same age, almost 2 or 3 years younger than me. We played together. And the earliest memory is maybe 3 or 4 years. As in the morning when you get up, and I go to my grandfather's lap, and he does money wheel, and I had to sit there. And when the sun rises, then we go up on the roof of the house, and we stay in the sunshine. It's wintertime, maybe, I remember. And then we had to yell, "Hey, bring the food!" Yeah.
Bring us some food.
Food, yes. We are sitting here, and then you do get something to eat. Normally, samba and tea. That's the morning traditional food.
So the servants would bring you some food.
Yeah, normally the mom is very busy because she's attending to her father who's elderly.
Well, it sounds like it was pretty very active life. Did you get any education before the age of 10?
My uncle, he started teaching me Tibetan alphabet when he was in the retreat, and then he comes to the home, and then he started me teaching the alphabets. And then it was a little surprise. My uncle, I have close affection. He's a lama, and when he started teaching, and then all affection is not there. The sternness, seriousness there, and it was shocking to me.
He became very strict.
Yeah, he became a little unusual.
You became a student.
Yes.
What kind of a student were you?
No, it's a Tibetan starting of the Tibetan alphabet at home.
At home, you were studying, but did you find it hard or easy to learn?
Oh yeah, it's not easy. It's a little bit confusing at the start.
At the start.
Yeah.
And was besides the alphabet, were you given any other education when you were under 10 years old? Any other class?
And there were also option of going to the day school started by the Chinese
Yeah.
at that time.
Oh.
And I remember going 1 or 2 times, and then somehow I dropped from attending the Chinese school. And then we have another state on the mountain, in the mountain, where one of the grandmothers looking after the fields. And then I was sent as her companion. Looks like there was now I as a companion. She stays all alone, and I'm her companion during the summer month.
Why was she going to that place in the mountains?
The field,
Yeah.
harvested, cultivation of the field, and she is looking after the field.
She was.
Is from the couple of miles from the main home.
I see.
A main home has its own fields.
I see. And she was supervising
She's
it
looking after,
and
taking
looking
care
after
of
that. You mentioned another person. Was it an aunt who lived in a cave as
That grandmother.
The same
Winter
one?
time, after the harvest,
Yeah.
then she come to the home
Uh-huh.
and she collect her supplies and she goes to the cave.
Where was the cave?
There's a river. And there are a couple of within the same village on the other side of the Mukrum, other side of the village, and there are 2 caves. One caves they call where my uncle is in the retreat, and other caves nearer to the home where grandmother goes to there.
Is that right? When she took her supplies to the cave, and why was she going to the cave? What was she going to do?
Oh, maybe she's doing some practices, maybe practices, and she enjoys her own life independently.
To live independently
Yeah.
and do some spiritual practices.
Yeah, that may be a purpose.
Was that a kind of a common tradition of some of the people in your family or in your village that they would spend some time?
In the winter, they do that.
They would go in the winter.
Yeah, there's nothing much to do outside. Sun or snow, and then winter they go to. Even the younger people go in the retreat, do prostrations and some spiritual practices.
How did they live in the caves? What do you have any knowledge of?
I've been there. It's carved out,
Uh-huh.
and there will be a small kitchen area, and then there will be normally a one sort of room, and it should have doors and all that. It's similar to the we have this, what do you call it, the national monument.
The Anastasia?
Anastasia.
Baudelaire National Monument?
Yeah, one here near to Los Alamos. Much bigger.
Much bigger
Yeah,
cave.
and that
Where the Indians lived,
Indians,
the Native
yeah,
American
yeah.
Indians lived. I see. And was it, I mean, it would be pretty cold in the winter, so how would she stay warm in the cave?
Normally maybe the fireplace, they keep fire.
Uh-huh.
Always constant lit a fire, and where they put the teapot and they stir their fire and it will remain there. And then warm cloth, and then this sustain, maybe the sustaining of the body with the diet, and then warm blankets. Otherwise no heating except lit a fire.
Just the fire. So it was a meditation practice,
It's a spiritual practice.
spiritual
Yeah.
practice, I see. Right.
May not be a serious, advanced kind of meditation, but they do prostration, they do mani, mantra.
Okay. It sounds interesting. And you actually visited her cave?
Oh, I visited my uncle's cave. His cave is sophisticated. There's a river following, and then little higher up, and when you go to the reef, you have to knock. There's a stone,
Yeah.
flat stone, and over the little ball of stone. The stone rings like a bell. And you hit that, and after some time, and he will come out. He open it's a door.
Yeah.
Open the door, then you go up stair.
Wow.
Stair, and then you get to his room.
What was that like?
Yeah, he's the one of the elder son of my grandfather. He's a Nyingmapa, and he's quite a little well known in the village as a lama.
As a lama. So he was considered a holy man.
Yeah,
In,
lama.
And would people go to him for advice or
Advice, normally they
prayers?
do prayers, long life practices, long life blessings.
And how long would, say, someone who did that as a regular tradition, how long would he live in that cave?
He might have had maybe over 6-7 years. He had an interesting life. He was married, okay, married, and he has a wife. And somehow how that happened, I don't know. Grandfather took care of his wife,
Okay.
and he became mad, and he ran away from the home, and he became a lama. He was disillusioned because father took his wife.
Wow.
And then that time the tension might have happened. Then my grandfather, I don't know how that happened. My mom and her mom, they went out of the home because he has taken his son's wife as wife, and they had 2 sons from that new wife.
Really?
And then he became a lama out of sort of desperation. It may be a blessing in disguise. Later on, he became a lama, and they looks like reconcile. Later, he come back to the home, and then he stays in the cave, in the village, and then he come to home often. And he was the one who did all the death ritual practices, ritual pujas when his father died after release of the Chinese prison.
I see. Oh yeah, we'll get to that part. So it was your mother and your grandfather's wife was very upset.
Yes.
And they left him.
They left him. They went again to that where my grandmother was staying in the village.
They did.
And later on, looks like they reconciled and he was back because that after having a second son, she died.
I see.
And then again they returned back to home, and they say my mother took care of my youngest uncle as her child. That's why we were a very 1 or 2 years, maybe around 2 years a gap.
Interesting. Yeah. So it was not acceptable for grandfather to bring not only a new woman, but the wife of his son. That was very upsetting.
Oh, upsetting.
To the women.
Looks like, and then, but there's nothing can be done. He maybe it looks like my way or the highway.
Yeah, he sounds like he was a pretty powerful guy. Was he the one that was arrested by the Chinese?
Yes.
Well, since we're talking about him, tell me what happened. First of all, were you there when that happened, when he was arrested?
I don't know. I don't remember what situation he was arrested. I remember he was in the Chinese military hospital. There were so many tubes were tied up around him, and he was hardly able to talk. And he might ask us to see him, and we went there along with my youngest uncle.
He was dying.
He was dying, most like. And then, after a long time, the Chinese thought that he can be cured, treated, and they released him, saying no problem with him. Politically, he's okay. And then he died on the way.
Wow. On the way home?
On the way. It was winter, snowy day. All his sons and relatives went to the military hospital. They took on a stretcher on the way. They had a tough time, a lot of snow. and there's no road, nothing. Everything has to be managed to bring home. By the time he reached home, he's already dead.
You said he was arrested by the Chinese at one
Yes.
point. Do you know why?
Maybe normally they arrest all the elderly people.
Yeah.
They ask questions, and they say you may be hiding some weapons. You have to show it. You have not handed over enough information to us, and that's under suspicions. And then he thought that this may be not a easy one, and then he managed to get a knife from some people, and he tried to commit suicide by cutting his throat. And then that did not happen. He did not die, and then Chinese took him to the hospital.
After he cut his throat?
Yes, and they tried to treat him, and when that did not happen, then he was released.
Wow. So maybe we could go back and say to when you were a child, and we are talking, let's see, you were born in 1950. So you were there. Are there, when you're growing up, are there Chinese in your village?
Yes,
There are.
Chinese military.
The military are there.
Yeah.
So you grew up with the Chinese in
Yeah,
your
not,
area.
not very close, but from a distance we see them.
Oh, from a distance
Yeah.
you see them. And you mentioned that there was a Chinese school that you went to. Can you?
Not a
was-
Chinese started a school.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I see that they do sing-song, kind of patriotic song, kids play. Not much of it teaching, I see that. And that maybe a starting, maybe some kind of informal school in the villages.
Okay. And when you went, so you didn't stay long though. It doesn't sound like
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I don't remember having learned anything except the kids are playing.
Yeah. And then after that, when did the things stay the same in the village, or did the Chinese come closer into the village? If they were off in the distance, you said, did they have military bases there? Or
Yeah,
what?
military base.
Military
and then-
bases.
And being a border of India and Tibet is maybe crucial.
Yeah.
And then they started interference in the Tibetan life, calling for meetings and trying to all sort of things, youth wings, this meeting, so many meetings. And meetings were more like harassment to the Tibetan. And then gradually they started horrible things,
Really?
as happened in the rest of the Tibet.
What kind of horrible things?
The rich family were targeted.
Did you see? What did you see with your own eyes?
In the public meetings.
You did?
Okay, in the nearby the Chinese military, there's a big ground, and then villagers were collected from different villages. They sit together in the order of their village they belong to. And then from the monasteries or the Purang districts, then in the Chinese military we saw the people are brought in from the prison. So the monasteries and the district headquarters, Zong is the district, is already taken by Chinese. And they were brought in, and they were put up in a good dress, and then on a big ground, a group of people from different villages sitting together. And then I saw, let's say, a monk is passed on to one group of village, and they accuse him this and that. He was beaten up, and the public humiliation, pluck his nose, and tear up his clothes, all kind of accusation. And then after that, that person is passed on to another group from another village, and they do the same thing. and it starts from the morning. In the evening, the person is almost dead.
Oh my gosh.
His ears were torn, bleeding, and dress was torn, and he's hardly able to walk. And then, likewise, there may be dozens of people rotated, going to from one group to another, and they accuse him. And in the end, in the evening, and those people are more like a dead person, and they are thrown in the military truck. Their hands were behind their back, and bleeding, and that's a horrible sight.
And these people were they village leaders? Who were they that were being
Or
so...
they may be village leaders, some of the monastery abbots, and then some of the old officials of the Tibetan government, and some of the old VIPs.
And so then they passed them along from one set of villagers who were gathered to another set, to another set. So these villagers might not have even known some of these people, right?
So it looks like that many of the accusers are from the law family, and they are trained by the Chinese.
They were trained to what?
To accuse him.
Yeah.
You were the official, and you treated us bad, and you were the dishonest, you took our land, you persecuted us for nothing, all kinds of false accusations.
So these certain groups of people were trained by the Chinese to actually inflict thamzing, or public
Thamzing, yes.
humiliation.
Yeah.
On them. And what would have happened if those villagers who were trained like that, if they said, I'm not going to do it, what do you think would have happened to them, or what do you know would have happened to them?
No, they may have been assured so many incentives. Normally they say that you are from this, your family is poor, you are poor because of this and that. So we're going to do that, and you're going to accuse this and that, and you get rewarded, you get promotion, some kind of name, and maybe monetary incentives. Because after many decades, some of those people, they spoke out. We were not doing voluntarily, we were forced to do it.
Right.
There were so many evidence from the people that they were forced to accuse.
Yeah. They were intimidated.
Yes.
Made to do that. And you saw this with your own eyes when you were a little boy?
Yes, I saw.
Do you remember how that left you feeling?
Yeah, it's a strange feeling that we never seen. And one of the grandfather was known to my family, and he was in a very, very pathetic, sad situation.
Really? So you actually knew one of the people personally
yeah.
being beaten. Did you feel he deserved it in any way?
Yeah, we have shocking. Yes.
It was shocking.
Shocking and terrifying.
So you don't feel that he deserved to be punished, right?
He was our neighbor.
He was your
neighbor. He was related, and he went. Originally, he belongs to our family, and he was given in marriage to other family. And I remember he used to play with me, and just quite a close acquaintance.
Wow. Then what was that like to see somebody that you knew subjected to that kind of treatment? How was that for you?
Yeah, it's very shocking and very, it's terrifying.
Terrifying, I imagine, yeah. Did you worry about anybody that in your family being treated like that?
Yeah, no, never. That's why my grandfather might have thought he may face similar sort of humiliations. So instead of going through that, he thought better commit suicide.
That's why he attempted suicide. He thought he might have been arrested and treated to thamzing. I see. So was this kind of treatment happening when you were closer to 10 Or because you remember it?
Yeah, maybe it's 8, 9.
8,
yeah,
9.
Yeah.
So that would have been 1957, 58.
Yeah, maybe around that. 50.
Was this-
maybe 59. Very close.
Was it before the Dalai Lama escaped Tibet?
Yeah, I think so.
It might
Before
have-
that, yeah.
It might have been happening before that?
Yeah, we might have been in India. I remember in India when we went to school and writing the date before class began date. I remember writing 1961 in Hindi. And 61 means then might have been already in India, so we
Right.
might have escaped.
It might have
It might have
escaped.
taken a year or so going whole bunch of people with animals, kids, and disposing of the animal on the way.
Well, let's get into that kind of ending, because you are, obviously things are getting very difficult in your village.
Oh, yeah.
Because you saw this happening in your village, is that correct?
Yes.
Right, and if we say the village, that would have been in
Mukrum.
Mukrum.
Yeah.
Okay, Mukrum. And so what happens next in your family? Do you stay in your village?
Then the family might have planned to escape. So planning with some of the uncles were with animals, maybe 5-6 miles from the main home in the mountain. And then my grandmother is in the east, in the state with the farm. And then my mother is in the main home, and the youngest uncle is in the monasteries.
Wow.
So the plan is hold all the group to escape and be there in India at certain place.
Okay.
And those uncles with the mountain with the sheep and the yaks, and they found out the different route through the mountains. And then me and my uncle and his wife and the other uncle and his wife and kids and grandmother, they're supposed to start from the state east, what do you call it, state. Then my mom is only in the home. The grandfather passed away, and then my two uncles are in different places. So the problem is how are we going to get my youngest uncle who is in the monasteries? So my mom suggested you stay in the home, and he will be coming home, and then you come along the river, and that will link to India, and it doesn't seem to be very dangerous, and I did not accept that. And then my mother was trying to leave the home, and she has other relative, confident relative to help her. And then they saw that some of the Tibetans are watching the family. They expect that this family might escape. And then the one of the women was there, and my mother caught her. Well, you are here, you are suspecting us. You come here, everything's intact, nothing is unusual. We are not leaving. And she came here, she was satisfied, she left. And soon after that night, my mother started from the main home, other groups started from the mountain. And then on the way, my uncle, his wife, and grandmother, and me, they were coming. It's dark, and it's wild. There's no proper trail. And then grandmother went ahead, and she lost track of the other group, and she yelled from the mountain. And then there's a river. On the other side, there's Chinese temporary camp, military camp. And my uncle was cursing where she's yelling, she's inviting the Chinese to arrest us. And she is also helpless in the dark, and where are the group? She started yelling in the mountain. And then somehow at the next day, before the sunrise, they reached on the border. Wow. And they were nothing, no harassment. They crossed the border, and then next few days, they all come to the same point.
Was grandmother found? Did she catch up with you?
She was going ahead. She was asking for the uncle and other, where are you?
She was ahead of the group.
Yes, so she may walk slowly, they ask her, go ahead.
Yeah.
And when they become dark, and she was not able to pursue it, and she was not able to see the other member, she started
She got scared.
scared. Yeah.
She almost gave everybody away.
Oh, that scared the other group.
You know, you didn't have cell phones in Tibet, so how did you organize to tell all these 4 different groups to get together?
They may be sending people messages.
Messages.
Going, they make a going messengers saying that we're going to do this and that.
Do you have any? Did your mother tell you why it was important for you to leave Tibet?
We saw some of the other families left before us, and we saw some of our neighbors were caught and they returned back. Oh. And that scared. Planning has to be done in proper time. And they plant in the fall when the fields are ready to be harvested, and they leave it intact. And normally people, what they do is they harvest, try to make something out of that, and then carry, sell, or try to make something, consolidation. And they plan to, at the time when the harvest is ready to be done, and that way they may not be suspected.
Right. The Chinese would think you will stay and harvest.
Yeah, more than Chinese, there are so many Tibetan minor petty spices, agent.
Many agents for the Chinese.
Spices, spice, poor, those poor families who are poor, and they are used by Chinese. You're going to watch, give us a report. So much more than the Chinese, the Tibetans were more
dangerous.
More dangerous.
They were watching out for the Chinese. Yeah. And did your family leave because, was this before your grandfather died? After he died. Yeah. He died, and did you leave because you thought your family would be arrested, maybe, or tortured?
No, they might have been. They might have heard from other people coming from. We are nearby the Mount Kailash.
Yes.
So many people from all part of Tibet come through our village, and they go to India and Nepal. So they might have got a lot of information through the travelers or the escapees
about
the whole situation.
About the whole situation. You know, you mentioned you were near Mount Kailash. How many days journey by foot?
Maybe those time maybe a couple of days.
A couple of days.
Yeah.
And did you ever go to Mount Kailash?
Yeah, I did. Maybe soon, little before we started leaving Tibet.
Really?
Yeah.
What do you remember about the journey?
The group of my mother and her relatives, and then we carry some donkeys to carry the luggages, and then walking on the foot. And normally, when we reach the Mount Kailash, we rested a couple of days and then do a circumambulation. And that time start early in the morning, maybe very early, maybe when the stars are there, and early in the morning, and then you are sleeping and walking together. And that's why I said you get dragged by them. And then
because you're a little boy.
At daybreak, they take a rest, drink teas, and then around noon, they take a break. And then in the evening, they camp out on the road, on the trail side, and all together, sit together, sleep together in a circular. And then I can start the next day early in the morning.
Oh my goodness. How many days did it take to go around?
Maybe 3 days, I think, yeah.
Do you know how many miles or kilometers?
Oh, I had somewhere around 22 miles.
22 miles.
About that.
About 20.
Healthy people can do within a day.
Some people.
Yeah.
If they're very strong.
Yeah.
I know, I've heard that. And for people who don't know, can you tell us why Mount Kailash is so important to...
Mount Kailash is a holy mountain for the Hindus. Hindus, they consider that's the abode of the Lord Shiva. Shiva and his consort Parvati, there's residence. and to the ethnic religion of Burn. Burn is ethnic religion in Tibet. Burn is Mount Kailash is the center of universe. And to the Buddhists, that's the physical mandala in the Kala Chakra text. The Mount Kailash is the representation of the mandala of the offering. So for the Hindus, for the Buddhists, for the Burn, is very holy mountain, and that's why much loved by different faiths.
Much loved.
And then when they do circumambulations, Buddhists do clockwise, Burn will do anti-clockwise.
Interesting.
And there are people, they prostrate all the way through the mountain, about 22 miles with the prostration. That's
They
very
get
extreme, dedication to their practices.
yes. It's very arduous, but very,
Yeah.
very special to people who can do that.
Right.
In terms of our story, maybe it'd be interesting to hear, what was the place that you picked in India to meet everybody? What place?
That I don't remember. It's before the check post.
It was before
Yeah,
the check.
there's a police check post, and they won't pass you beyond that. You get to stay there for many days together. They say we had to get the permission, green signal from the Delhi, and they stop it.
How did you, do you have any memory of how it felt to know you were leaving Tibet?
Oh yeah, it's a little bit of excitement to seeing a new place that is there.
Yeah.
At the same time, it's also horrible. No house. We're sleeping in the open air in the tent, and in the tent, rain started, heavy rain, and drifting from the tent. And then there are some animals are there. It's a difficult with the kids, and then elderly people, they miss their home. They expect to go back, return back to Tibet within a year or two.
Okay.
There was very high expectation that we are temporarily going to India with the hope of returning back to Tibet with the animals and the property. Everything will be normal back very soon.
So when you left, many members of the family, they obviously had herds of yak, and the house had some valuable possessions, I'm sure. What did the family bring with you on that journey? What did they bring?
Oh, little bit of ration, little supplies, some
then-
food, some dry meat, some dry cheese, some zamba, and then other than that they may not have, because it's not easy to carry on the
no.
bag.
So the family had, in that beautiful house that you grew up in, they had to leave their entire
Yes.
belongings, yes?
Right.
In order to look like they were not leaving,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah, everything intact.
Everything was intact.
Yes.
Do you know what happened to the herds of animals, the yaks?
The animals from the mountain, the uncles brought back to India, and then gradually those are sold to the Indian.
They were able to bring them
Yeah,
in.
they sold, and that also Tibetan culture is a big kind of sad selling your animal, and all those animals go to butcher, so it's horrible.
It was horrible to think
Yeah.
of that as their ending. Maybe we can get some idea, just in general, what happens. Your family escapes to where do you land? What's the name of the place?
We were put up in the sand dune, where all the Tibetan from that part of the Tibet, they're coming to there. There may be maybe a couple thousands temporary camp, and then there were schools, day schools, and we might have stayed there till mid-60s.
Till the mid-60s?
Yeah, mid-60s. And then later on, the people were sent from there to different part of India.
And where did you go?
I landed up school in Dharamsala, nearby Dharamsala,
Uh-huh.
in 1966. And
19
from there, we were sent to Missouri.
And did you go to school in Missouri?
Yes.
I see. And then what happens after that
So
to you?
in San Diego, my mother passed away. She was only 35.
Oh my goodness.
And so many family died. And on the road constructions, other uncles died.
Oh.
And then that's why I became full orphan.
Was your mother died doing road construction work?
No, she might have, she died in the camp, first
died-
camp, and I saw due to dysentery, diarrhea, some kind of.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah, many did. Your mother's name was Kaldin Sangmo.
Right,
Is that right?
right.
And she is the daughter of, what's her
Yeah,
name?
that's I put the May Pemba Babar.
May Pempa Babar.
Yeah.
She is the daughter of. And there was only one daughter and 8 sons.
Yes.
And your father, why don't you tell us his full name again?
Sela Dorje,
Sela Dorje,
son of Jawa MG,
yep, of
Wangdu.
of Deasley Gower.
Jawa,
Okay.
his name is Wangdu. MG means the doctor,
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Oh, he was the son of Amji Wangdu.
Wangdu.
Got it.
The family is Jawat.
And the
Jawa.
family is Gawak. Gyalwa.
Yeah.
Gawak. Thank you. I wanted to get the family background. So your mother dies probably of dysentery in the camp. Then you're officially an orphan. What?
Right.
Maybe you could just give us a general idea. Oh, it's okay. Can you give us an idea of what happens to you? Are you educated then in Dharamsala or where?
Dharamsala, we put they call transit school.
Yes.
Transit school, and I was pretty good in Hindi and Tibetan at the first camp where we were taught.
Went to the first camp. Is that what you said? Where was that?
Sandu,
In Sandu.
Sandeo.
Okay. And what happened there?
Their temporary camps were set up. Kids can go to day school.
Okay.
Day school, we get taught not English, Tibetan, Hindi, and all other subjects in Hindi medium.
Wow.
Science, history,
Good. And then when you.
and then their camp was what do you call? From the camp, people were sent to different settlements, and I landed up temporary school, transit. They call transit school in Dharamsala. Being a full orphan, and after a year there, and we were selected to go to Missouri, Tibetan Homs Foundation. And there I started my formal education with English as medium. And then I graduated high school November 73.
What happens to you after that?
After that I went to college, Chandigarh, India. And Chandigarh, India. And then I went teacher training in Bangalore. And I became a teacher.
Did you? Where? Where did you become a teacher?
I taught Balakopi and Mongot and Odisha, some of the Tibetan settlements. And the schools are being, all the schools, they call CST, Central School Tibetans for Tibet, managed by Indian government for the Tibetans. And my wife also teacher.
Wonderful. What were you teaching?
Mostly I taught mathematics and little English
Mm-hmm. English.
Some science subjects.
It was quite a change from a little boy.
Oh yeah, yeah. You made link with that. That's some of the approximate date and time,
Thank
places, India.
It's wonderful. And when did you come to America?
October 93.
October 93.
92, yeah, October 92.
Okay. Well, there's so much I could ask you about all
Right.
those experiences, but because we are going to need to summarize
Sorry,
now,
yeah.
I would like to ask you, what are your hopes for Tibet? What do you wish would happen next?
Historically, we were independent country, and that we are very proud, being independent in terms of language, culture, monetary, military, and then realistically, I strongly agree with the middle way approach of the Dalai Lama and reconcile with the Chinese, and the Chinese understand the Tibetan issues like culture, environment preservations, and moderate development, keeping the environment as a important factor for the future. And then Tibetan should also realistically adopt and try to work with the Chinese government, because the economy is a big matter, and then realistically reconcile and live peacefully. Tibet has vast land we can share with the Chinese, and Chinese should also appreciate the Tibetan mindset for the sentient beings. We pray for the sentient beings that include Chinese. And the only realistic approach is the middle way policy adapted by the Tibetan administration for the Tibetans and also for the Chinese, and also for the peace of for the world. And then at the same time, Tibetan has to keep the identity in terms of language, culture, and the spiritual practices, and also be a modern, educated technologist with the Tibetan identity which are relevant.
Yes.
So be a realistic for the future. That's it.
That's it. That sounds like
Thank you very much,
very much.
for giving me opportunity.
Well, we want to thank you, and again, I just, in conclusion, want to reiterate my first question. If this interview was shown in Tibet or China, would this be a problem for you?
No problem. I've been to China, I've been to Tibet, Lhasa in 2006. And Chinese people are very nice people, smart, intelligent, and only the government has to be realistic in keeping the Tibetan needs as for the sake of Chinese themselves, because Tibetan part of the humanities, and then Tibetan culture and spiritual practice will be shared with the Chinese, and they be helpful for better improvement of their life. So many Chinese intellectuals very supportive of the Tibetan issues, and the Chinese dissidents, and also many humanitarians, lawyers, and they think that government is not understanding the rule, true issues that needs to be tackled courageously for the future. How long they can put pressure, and that will not last long. It has a limit. So limit has reached.
Okay, Well, thank you very much for
Thank
those
you
ideas
very much.
and for being a part of our project.
Sure, sure.
Thank you very much.